Mongabay Reports is a series that shares evergreen articles from Mongabay.com, read by myself, Mike DiGirolamo. This episode's feature article is Investors Say Agroforestry Isn't Just Climate Friendly, It's Also Profitable, by Stephanie Haynes on the 8th of July, 2020. In the latter part of 2016, Ethan Steinberg and two of his friends planned a driving tour across the U.S. to interview farmers. Their goal was to solve a riddle that had been bothering each of them for some time. Why was it, they wondered, that American agriculture basically ignored trees? There was no esoteric inquiry. According to a growing body of scientific research, incorporating trees into farmland benefits everything from soil health to crop production to the climate. Steinberg and his friends, Jeremy Kaufman and Harrison Green, also suspected it might yield something else: money. We had noticed there was a lot of discussion and movement of capital into holistic grazing, no-till cover cropping, Steinberg recalls, referencing some of the land and climate-friendly agricultural practices that have been garnering environmental and business attention recently. We thought, what about trees? That's when a light bulb went off. The trio created Propagate Ventures, a company that now offers farmers software-based economic analysis, on-the-ground project management, and investor financing to help add trees and tree crops to agricultural models. One of Propagate's key goals, Steinberg explained, was to get capital from interested investors to the farmers who need it, something he saw as a long-time barrier to this sort of tree-based agriculture. Propagate quickly started attracting attention. Over the past few years, the group based in New York and Colorado has expanded into 8 states, primarily in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and is now working with 20 different farms. In June of 2020, it announced that it had received $1.5 million in seed funding from Boston-based Neglected Climate Opportunities, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Jeremy and Hannelore Grantham Environmental Trust. My hope is that they can help farmers diversify their production systems and sequester carbon, says Eric Smith, investment officer from the trust. In a perfect world, we'd have 10 to 20% of the U.S. land production in agroforestry. For the past several years, private sector interest in sustainable and climate-friendly efforts has skyrocketed. Haim Israel, Bank of America's head of thematic investment, suggested at the World Economic Forum earlier in 2020 that the climate solutions market could double from $1 trillion to $2 trillion by 2025. Flows to sustainable funds in the U.S. have been increasing dramatically, setting records even during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the financial services firm Morningstar. And while agriculture investment is only a small subset of these numbers, there are signs that investments in regenerative agriculture practices that improve rather than degrade the earth are also increasing rapidly. In a 2019 report, the Croatan Institute, a research institute based in Durham, North Carolina, found some $47.5 billion worth of investment assets in the U.S. with regenerative agriculture criteria. The capital landscape in the U.S. and globally is really shifting, says David Lazax, senior fellow at the Croatan Institute. People are beginning to ask more questions about how their money is working for them as it relates to financial returns, or how it might be working against them in the creation of extractive economies, climate change, or labor issues. Agroforestry, the ancient practice of incorporating trees into farming, is just one subset of regenerative agriculture, which itself is a subset of the much larger ESG, or environmental, social, and governance investment world. But according to Smith and Steinberg, along with a small but growing number of financiers, entrepreneurs, and company executives, it is one particularly ripe for investment. Although relatively rare in the U.S., agroforestry is a widespread agricultural practice across the globe. Project Drawdown, a climate change mitigation think tank that ranks climate solutions, estimates that some 650 million hectares of land are currently in agroforestry systems. Other groups put the number even higher, and the estimates for returns on those systems are also significant, according to proponents. Ernst Goetsch, a leader in the regenerative agriculture world, estimates that agroforestry systems can create 8 times more profit than conventional agriculture. Harry Ossenmacher, founder of the German company Forest Finance, which connects investors to sustainable forestry and agroforestry projects, said in a 2019 interview that he expects between 4% and 7% return on investments at least. His company had already paid out $7.5 million in gains to investors, with more income expected to be generated later. This has led to a wide variety of for-profit interest in agroforestry. There are small startups such as Propagate and small farmers such as Martin Anderton and John O'Niger, who raise chickens alongside new chestnut trees on a swath of land in western Massachusetts. In Mexico, Ronnie Cummins, co-founder and international director of the Organic Consumers Association, is courting investors for funds to support a new agave agroforestry project. Small coffee companies such as Dean's Beans are using the farming method, as are larger farms such as former U.S. Vice President Al Gore's Caney Fork Farms. Some of the largest chocolate companies in the world are investing in agroforestry. We are indeed seeing a growing interest from the private sector, says Dietmar Stoyan, lead scientist for value chains, private sector engagement and investments with the research group World Agroforestry, also known by the acronym ICRAF. And for some of them, the idea of agroforestry is quite new. Part of this, he and others say, is growing awareness about agroforestry's climate benefits. According to Project Drawdown, agroforestry practices are some of the best natural methods to pull carbon out of the air. The group ranked silvopasture, a method that incorporates trees and livestock together, as the 9th most impactful climate change solution in the world, above rooftop solar power, electric vehicles, and geothermal energy. If farmers increased silvopasture acreage from approximately 550 million hectares today to about 770 million hectares by 2050, Drawdown estimated carbon dioxide emissions could be reduced over those 30 years by up to 42 gigatons, more than enough to offset all the carbon dioxide emitted by humans globally in 2015, according to the NOAA, and could return $206 billion to $273 billion on investment. Part of the reason that agroforestry practices are so climate-friendly, systems without livestock, i.e. normal agroforestry, like shade-grown coffee, for example, are also estimated by Drawdown to return well on investment while sequestering 4.45 tons of carbon per hectare per year, is because of what they replace. Traditional livestock farming, for instance, is carbon-intensive. Trees are cut down for pasture, fossil fuels are used as fertilizer for feed, and that feed is transported across borders and sometimes the world using even more fossil fuels. Livestock raised in concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, produce more methane than cows that graze on grass. A silvopasture system, on the other hand, involves planting trees in pastures, or at least not cutting them down. Farmers rotate livestock from place to place, allowing soil to hold on to more carbon. There are similar benefits to other types of agroforestry practices. Forest farming, for instance, involves growing a variety of crops under a forest canopy, a process that can improve biodiversity and soil quality, and also support the root systems and carbon sequestration potential of farms. Etel Higone, senior campaign director at campaign group Mighty Earth, says a growing number of chocolate companies have expressed interest in incorporating agroforestry practices, a marked shift from when she first started advocating for that approach. When we first started talking to chocolate companies and traders about agroforestry, pretty much everybody thought I was a nutter, she says. But fast forward 3 years on, and pretty much every major chocolate company and cocoa trader is developing an agroforestry plan. What that means on the ground, though, can vary widely, she says. Most of the time, it is a company's sustainability department that is pushing for agroforestry investment, not the C-suite. Some companies have committed to sourcing 100% of their cacao from agroforestry systems. Others are content with 5% of their cacao coming from farms that use agroforestry. What a company considers agroforestry can also be squishy, she points out, a situation that makes her and other climate advocates worry about companies using the term to greenwash, or essentially pretend to be environmentally friendly without making substantive change. What is agroforestry, says Simon Koenig, executive director of Climate Focus North America. There is no clear definition. There's an academic, philosophical definition, but there's not a practical definition. Nothing that says it includes this many species. Basically, agroforestry is anything you want it to be, and anything you want to write on your brochure. He says he has seen cases in South America where people have worked to transform degraded cattle ranches into cocoa plantations. They have planted banana trees alongside cocoa, which needs shade when young. But when the cocoa is 5 years old and requires more sun, the farmers take out the bananas. They say it's agroforestry, Koenig says. So there are misunderstandings. There are different objectives and standards. He has been working to produce a practical agroforestry guide for cocoa and chocolate companies. One of the guide's main takeaways, he says, is that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to agroforestry. It depends on climate, objectives, markets, and all sorts of other variables. This is one of the reasons that agroforestry has been slow to gain investor attention, says Lazaks of the Croatan Institute. There really aren't the technical resources, the infrastructure, the products that work to support an agroforestry sector at the moment, Lazaks says. While agroforestry is seen as having significant potential for the carbon offset market, its variability makes it a more complicated agricultural investment. Another challenge to agroforestry investment is time. Tree crops take years to produce nuts, berries, or timber. This can be a barrier for farmers who often do not have extra capital to tie up for years. It can also turn off investors. People are bogged down by business as usual, says Stoyan from World Agroforestry. They have to report to shareholders, give regular reports. It's almost contradictory to the long-term nature of agroforestry. This is where Steinberg and Propagate Ventures come in. The first part of the company's work is to fully analyze a farmer's operation, Steinberg says. It evaluates business goals, uses geographic information system components to map out land, and determine the trees most appropriate for the particular agricultural system. With software analytics, Propagate predicts long-term cost to revenue and yields, key information for both farmers and possible private investors. After the analysis phase, Propagate helps implement the agroforestry system. It also works to connect third-party investors with farmers using a revenue-sharing model in which the investor takes a percentage of the profit from harvested tree crops and timber. Additionally, Propagate works to arrange commercial contracts with buyers who are interested in adding agroforestry-sourced products to their supply chains. Here's an opportunity to work with farmers to increase profitability by incorporating tree crops into their operations in a way that's context-specific, Steinberg says. And it also starts addressing the ecological challenge that we face in agriculture and beyond. This has been a special Mongabay audio report, original article by Stephanie Haynes. I am your reader, Mike DiGirolamo. Special projects like this are made possible by our Patreon supporters. Please consider becoming a monthly sponsor via our Patreon page at patreon.com/Mongabay. Just as little as $1 per month will help us offset the production costs and hosting fees to help us make more content like this. Keep up with all of Mongabay's news from Nature's Frontline at mongabay.com, or get updates from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, where our handle is @Mongabay. Thanks for listening.